I watched her as she watched me, and then an incredible thing happened. She arose from the couch and came slowly toward me, and she held a knife in her hand. She came toward me with the knife at her side. Clever, I thought. In fact, a miracle of cleverness. This phantom had gone mad. It is madder than I. It fancies itself able to slay me. It advances upon me with its dagger of mist, and intends to fall upon me. This mysterious logic that grows of itself like a fungus in darkness. Where will it end? Already it towers around me, a monstrous weed rising out of my madness, and I am chilled by its shadow. And I continued to think. I desired to be rid of her. My desire finally overleaped my befuddled senses. And now this desire has become a new soul for my phantom. Yet I planned no details in my desire. I did not will this melodramatic denouncement. Then it is obvious that my desire is like a seed filled with hidden life. I blow a thought into my phantom, and that thought develops and hatches. This is a phenomenon to be written about. As I thought, she came closer and finally stood over me. Her eyes, I observed, were completely mad. Yes, they were like horrible fires, and her face was a marvel of mimicry. The cleverness of my thought appalled me. I said nothing, however, and watched her. She began to talk. I had become used to this phase of the hallucination. But this time my senses shuddered at her words. They who had been so eager to sate themselves in the possession of this chimera, and who had betrayed my omnipotence, they now suffered the penalty of their blindness. For it was evident that to them, this chimera was still real. She was an avenger, towering with a knife above them. But Mallare smiled. See, he murmured aloud, here is the reward of your folly. You would philander with this shadow. You would disport yourself in abominable fornications with this hallucination. Very well. I am amused at your clownish terror, even more than I was amused at your burlesque ecstasies. Tremble now, for here is a Medusa, a Messalina come to destroy you. Whimper and grovel, but observe in your idiot cowardice how Mallare, the indifferent one, sits and smiles, still supreme, still a spectator ravished by the dark comedy. I could not resist this moment of triumph. I laughed, although there was no one to enjoy my laughter, and I watched her. She was still talking deep, meaningless words, for it was her habit to talk in the gypsy language when moved. Often this fact baffled me, but I perceive now that my thought was a seed containing my omniscience in microcosm. God does not invent languages, but he understands them, since it is unnecessary for him to know, in his indifference, what they are saying. And the language my phantom spoke, although foreign to me, was nevertheless an integral part of my thought, another of the manifestations with which God naively astounds himself. It is his only diversion. I was curious concerning the effect upon my senses of this illusory attack. And, I must confess, these things simply, there came to me the idea that Mallare might be slain by the cowardice of his senses. There would be nothing illogical in that. For if this chimera had been able to trick him into the illusion of love, it was entirely natural that it should be able to now trick him into the illusion of death. With the exception that death is an illusion, even Mallare, the indifferent one, might not survive. Ah, Mallare, Mallare. He wanders pensively amid treacherous shadows, Mallare. An image debating subtly the existence of its mirror. I sigh. But it is one of the relaxations of God to pity himself, his uselessness. Her talk came to an end, and she raised her knife. Die or not, the thing was too incredible a farce to leave me unmoved. Yes, I laughed out of sheer delight. The drollery of this phantom hacking at Mallare with non-existent dagger. A mad windmill charging, Don Quixote, superb. I perceive now a moral in the situation that I did not think of at the time. Sacrilege is of vital danger to God. His omnipotence is dependent upon the submission of his creatures. And they who, inspired with the quaint illusion of their own reality, turn upon him, to destroy themselves. But the destruction impoverishes their God. At the time, however, the spectacle alone, and not its significances, preoccupied me. I laughed and reached my hand to the dagger. A sadistic gesture, for I desired to give my senses a taste of its reality, and thus enjoy their squirming. Marvelous dagger. The point of it was sharp. Mallare can invent daggers, beautiful daggers that poise melodramatically over his heart, that move slowly in quest of his life blood. Death, a property of man's parts. Clever dagger, I murmured. Do you enjoy the illusion of yourself as much as this chimera wielding you quivers with the illusion of an impending murderer? It paused before me, and I nodded. My laughter had halted it. It was evident that my thought, operating in this phantom, was confused by my laughter. I nodded again. It would be logical and extremely pleasant, I thought, if this creature, shrinking before the sacrilege of destroying its creator, turned on itself and accomplished a more probable assassination. She stood before me, and I was pleased to see her hatred increase. It was amazingly vivid. I observed the viciousness of her features. Her face had become contorted. Its fury was like a mask, but she had dropped the knife. I could not refrain smiling an encouragement at her, the naive applause an author bestows upon his puppets. But the plot still contained surprises. Yes, astonishing denouncements began to crowd the stage, for she started to undress. Here was a trick that baffled Mallare. I winced with distaste. The consistency which I have hitherto admired in my madness seems rather dubious, I thought. The melodrama of illusions grows too improbable. This fine tragedy crumbles into the ludicrous. She forgets her hate. She is again Rita, the infatuated one. A lightning change that smacks the inferior vaudeville. She is about to undress and resume her deplorable assaults upon my idiot senses. A poorly written business. I have a notion to walk out. But I remained smiling at the absurdity, too tired to leave my chair. I was pleased to notice that her nudity did not this time appeal to my doting madness. This marked an improvement, a foretaste of victory. The disintegration had begun. Her body was interesting. It was covered with bruises. There were stains on its flesh. At the sight of them, the lodge brother, the sniveling one who had followed me home in the snow, set up a veritable caterwauling. Here was a terrible evidence of the fellow's guilt. The bruises, of course. An accomplishment penitent. this blubberer able to transform himself from a sense of homicidal guilt into a mere feeling of general remorse. She was not dead, yet he lingered. And now, at the sight of her bruises, he rushed forward with inferior regrets. He will bear sturdy, this weeping one. Of all the sprawling Mallares, he alone lacks logic. But I will come to him later. The plot is more entertaining than this incongruous spectator weeping and hissing out of turn. She began to talk once more and wildly. The sense of it dawned on me. She was calling Goliath. He came shuffling from his usual hiding place, the curtains. A diverting little monster. I bear him no ill will, although I grow slightly envious of his madness. Yet his madness is a terrific flattery. It is involved in piquant one, and one of the things that remain for me to study cautiously. The madness of Goliath and, of course, this gentleman, Niobe. He came out, a fact at the time that astonished me, for I had not been aware of his madness. He stood with his bent and bulbous body, shaking his hands, resting like a baboon's on the floor. I was noticing the excitement on his huge head when it came to me with a curious feeling he was looking at her. Yes, Goliath, my servant, was looking not at me, but at her. Careful, Mallare, be careful, I thought. The insane sniveling of this lodge brother distracted me. His arms came around me, and he rested his head on me and wept. Insufferable ass. It was impossible to think. I remained with my eyes watching and repeating cautiously to myself the warning. He was a trick too baffling for Mallare. Mallare must suspend himself, close his eyes, and climb slowly back into his black heaven. Then Goliath, too, is a phantom. I thought, but be careful. Be careful, Mallare. That is too easy. And you remember, it is dangerous to hide from too many memories. They will become shadows that nibble at you. He is not a phantom. Goliath is no chimera. He lives. He has reality. And how does it come? I continued thinking. That he sees that which is visible only to you. His eyes are fastened on her, who is to only be seen inside the caverns of Mallare. He raised his arms. His hands touched her. I am imagining Goliath. Goliath is not in the room. This is a memory of him that has wandered onto the scene of my madness.